Number 10 is a secret Ukrainian prison. So between 2014 and 2016, it's been confirmed that the Security Service of Ukraine, aka the SBU, operated a secret prison located in Kharkiv. Now the prison held inmates the SBU suspected of supporting Russia during its military intervention in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. Survivor Mykola Vakara came out after being held at the prison for 600 days. He shared that he was tortured constantly, and the first thing he was told when he arrived was that he would get hit in the chest for every wrong answer he gave. Mykola was kept in a 2 square meter cell that was so cold that water inside it used to turn to ice, which actually caused him to lose his kidney. He was transported back to the prison after a surgery and forced to confess that he supported Russian-backed fighters even when he didn't. Mykola was finally released after Ukraine came under pressure from human rights groups fighting for the prisoner's release. To buy his silence and not say anything about the facility, he was paid a total of $3.80. You could have paid me $1 million and I still would have come clean about everything. Coming in at number 9 is Cat's Eye in Thailand. As a cat lover, the name is nice, I'm not gonna lie, but the place itself was far from it. Cat's Eye was a secret CIA prison set up in 2002 to hold Abu Zubaydah, a man suspected to be one of Osama bin Laden's right-hand men. He was the only inmate of the prison for about 6 months, and his living arrangement consisted of him being inside a coffin-sized box and being constantly waterboarded nearly every day until he fainted. The second prisoner arrived in November 2002, and both men were used to test out enhanced interrogation techniques. Give me the strength! Give me the strength, it just gets worse. They were also both subjected to walling, which is basically a punish where they were repeatedly slammed against a wall. A month later, the prison was apparently shut down and moved to Poland, but no one can confirm this. Till this day, no one even knows the location of Cat's Eye or the fate of those prisoners. At number 8, we have Lexington HSU. Now this top secret high security unit was created in the 1980s and was a female-only prison. It housed any and all political prisoners that were accused of attempting to overthrow or disrupt the US government. Infamous inmates include Sylvia Baraldini, who fought for Puerto Rican independence, and Susan Rosenberg, who supported the Black Liberation Army. Now the prison itself was so secret it actually existed completely underground in total isolation from the world. External communication was radically restricted, as you can probably imagine. Prisoners were strip searched daily, subjected to constant fluorescent lighting and sensory deprivation, and all of that was done so they'd be worn down enough for an ideological transformation. It was closed down in 1988 after protests came in from Amnesty International. Filling at number 7th slot is a salt pit in Afghanistan, and surprisingly I'd heard of this one before despite it being secretly run by the CIA. The salt pit was meant to hold inmates suspected of having links with terrorists or involved in any terrorist activity. The prison itself used to be a brick factory, so as you can imagine, its cells are hella small and have no toilets or windows. Most inmates have one bucket in their room that they use for all their extratory needs, and for a bed they sleep on the cold floor naked. All of them are subjected to inhumane treatment and punishments like frequent mock executions. Can you even imagine the trauma of having to see them pretend to kill someone or them jokingly telling you that they're gonna kill you? Like, that is disgusting. The guards also play super loud music during the day as another form of psychological torture. Now after all that, only one death has been confirmed by the prison, and the inmate was chained above his head, stripped, beaten and drenched, and then he died of hypothermia the next day. His family was never informed, and that is bloody sad. Now at number 6 is Penny Lane. Now this is one of the many secret prisons located at Guantanamo Bay. Opening its doors in 2003, Penny Lane is not your average prison. Just imagine the prison Pablo Escobar built for himself, and then you'll have more of an accurate idea of what it's like. The inmates live a life of luxury with access to comfy beds, a shower, a TV, and mind you, everyone there is a confirmed terrorist. It's unique because only terrorists undergoing double agent training are allowed to stay there. When their training is complete, they're sent back to their terrorist hub and have to send inside info back to the CIA. And in exchange, they get millions of dollars, which is a pretty good deal given you're a terrorist. Sometimes it works, sometimes the terrorists just go back to their group and never contact the CIA again. It's really 50-50. Coming in at number 5 are Chinese black jails. These secret prisons are illegally run by individual Chinese provinces and local governments. Now if someone has a grievance, for example, they have to report it to their provincial or local government, and if they don't get the justice they wanted, their then they're allowed to send that same report to the central government, which is like the daddy government. But it's sort of an inception situation since the governments are low-key competing with each other trying to be the best one. The number of reports coming in from each province decides how effective that government is, so to avoid being deemed ineffective, these local governments seek out the people who send in reports to the central government and do very, very bad things to them. The government's like, you ain't no damn snitch! Get in jail! We're in this together! Now they currently employ over 10,000 people to kidnap, torture, and detain their reporting citizens. The black prisons they're put in themselves are usually vacant homes, guest houses, or psychiatric wards. In 2009 it was confirmed that there are around 73 black jails inside Beijing alone, and the central government is very privy to that fact. They're just like, well, that's none of my business though. Carry on. At number 4 is the USP Marion. This secret prison was built back in 1963 as a high-tech replacement for Alcatraz. Like, how horrific of a prison do you have to be if you're the high-tech version of Alcatraz? Alcatraz was bad enough. Now 500 Alcatraz prisoners were transferred there and were forced into a behavior modification program. Prisoners shared that these sessions were more like psychological attack sessions. In 1973, the prisoners protested against the beating of a fellow inmate, which led to even stricter programs, one of which being the control unit. Now the control unit made the USP Marion famous, and it essentially involved you being in solitary confinement for 22 hours at a time. When you hear the phrase Marion model, that literally translates to psychological torture in every way, shape, and form. After 2 guards were killed in the early 80s, the entire prison was transformed into a giant control unit. And if I was in that place, I would go crazy. Can you imagine everyone in there is in just solitary confinement all the time? No! That's like my worst nightmare. Not being able to talk. Hell no. Filling at number 3 slot is a secret Iraqi government prison that is yet to be named. This prison is so horrific it's been dubbed worse than the Abu Ghraib prison. The prison is located in an airfield west of Baghdad, and prisoners are arrested and taken there if they've participated in an act that's deemed against the state. Freed captives have said they were suffocated, electrocuted, and raped while inside the prison. One man traveled to Iraq in search of his missing son, and after asking too many questions, they arrested him, beat him, sodomized him, attach electrical charges to his private parts, and then forced him to sign a confession which he didn't even get to read. Another inmate said he was raped on a daily basis and was beaten so badly he had serious leg injuries and even lost his front teeth. And that doesn't even scrape the tip of the iceberg of the things that I read about this prison. Like, I'm just not gonna go into it any further. You guys can get the gist of how bad it is. Now at number 2 is Homan Square. Now this one sounds shady as hell. Homan Square is an interrogation compound located in Chicago, and it's highly dangerous since A, it's off the books, and B, the inmates inside aren't in any database, meaning family and friends can't find them. Prisoners have no access to any lawyer or attorney, and any that try to come to the facility are turned away immediately. Inmates can be interrogated for anywhere between 12 to 24 hours, and honestly, it's basically like a domestic black site. That's literally what it is. Angel Perez, a man released from the compound, said when he was taken in, he was sexually assaulted with a metal pipe by an officer that wanted him to cooperate in a drug sting. And finally, at number 1 are unnamed Yemeni prisons. Now this came from the Human Rights Watch, who were informed by various people that there is in fact a huge network of secret prisons in eastern Yemen. The anonymous people that came forward talked about what goes on in there and have said inmates suffer from sexual harassment and threats, electric shocks, sleep and sensory deprivation, beatings with metal tools, and they get stripped and whipped every day. Yemeni family members of those who have just disappeared for months at a time never get a word about whether that person is alive, where they are, what they're doing, absolutely nothing.
Coming in at number 10, we have Alcatraz. Extremely famous, extremely stressful. Often referred to as the Island of Evil, Alcatraz is one of the most famous prisons in the world, known for being one of the first modern-day maximum security prisons. The island of Alcatraz is in the middle of San Francisco Bay in California, in the United States. Some of America's most ruthless criminals called Alcatraz home, including the notorious gangster Al Capone. The prison was known for being brutal. Being able to see San Francisco so near yet so far across the water must have been a huge temptation for prisoners. Nonetheless, Alcatraz claimed to be inescapable in its time. It ended as a maximum security prison in 1963. Now, despite 14 escape attempts, it's thought that no prisoners ever managed to successfully get out alive. The cold water and the strong currents made that nigh on impossible. And then there were the rumours of the sharks. Next up, inmates in this facility have reportedly been made to walk naked on dog leashes in the freezing cold. At number 9, we have the Spring Creek Correctional Center. So this prison is in Alaska, already a far-flung state of the United States of America. Some parts of Alaska are reasonably populated, but this prison is amid 328 acres of national park. The inmates here will likely spend the rest of their lives in prison, unlikely to ever feel warm climes ever again. The dog leash incident came in 2013, and in 2015 a hysterical woman approached the prison with a gun and demanded that the prisoners be freed. Guards refused and she shot herself in the head in front of all of them. The prison is said to at times have no running water and just be a horrible place to live. Taking things over to Europe for number 8, we have the Mamertine in Italy. Luckily this prison is no longer in use, but when it was a total and utter abomination, and one of the scariest isolated prisons around. The Romans were savage. Famously. A lot of isolated prisons are on rocks on islands, but this was below ground, which actually totally terrifies me. Sentencing people to a life without human interaction or sunlight, the Romans built this prison in 614 BC, which is an insane amount of time ago. The building is still standing though, and if you wanted, you could visit the place that, according to legend, Saints Peter and Paul were imprisoned. Coming into number 7, we have Robben Island. Robben Island is infamous for being the prison that held South African President Nelson Mandela for over 18 years of his life. The prison was founded off the coast of Cape Town by Dutch settlers in the 1470s. The penal isle has been home to many prisoners over the years, and all survivors who have discussed their treatment have said that the prison was absolutely grueling. In Mandela's autobiography, which is a fantastic read, he said that he was welcomed by a prison guard who told him that he would die on the island. He also said that he and other prisoners were forced to work in a lime quarry, and the relentless glare from the sun caused them absolutely permanent eye damage. Mandela spent his time in a 6-foot cell. Not only was he isolated from the mainland of South Africa, he was mostly isolated from other prisoners in a tiny space. How he stayed sane is another testimony to the strength of his character. Prior to Mandela's time incarcerated there, the island was a place where people were banished and exiled. The rocks and the choppy water made sure that swimming to freedom just wasn't an option. Countless people drowned in the water in their attempts to flee. Now the brutal prison closed in 1999. These days, nearing 20 years on, you can visit the island as a cultural heritage site. Very famous and still functioning at number 6, we have Guantanamo Bay. Guantanamo Bay detention camp is staying open for the foreseeable future. Trump signed an order to keep it that way. Guantanamo was opened in 2002 by George W. Bush as part of his war on terror. The detention camp is in a far-flung part of Cuba and is surrounded by ocean on one side and wasteland on another. The most terrifying thing is that within Guantanamo, US government agents and soldiers can do what they want to prisoners without worrying about the law. The operations in Guantanamo Bay detention camp are considered to be a major breach of human rights by Amnesty International. It is said that inmates are detained indefinitely without any trial. People have died here, some by suicide, and it is said that minors have been detained. It's scary, desolate, isolated and inescapable. If you ever wind up here, you'd better hope you're guilty of the crime you're accused of, because you'll be treated like you are, but you won't be treated like you're a human. Often referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rocky, coming into number 5 we have ADX Supermax. ADX Supermax is a maximum security facility in Colorado mountains, and like Alcatraz, it holds some of the worst criminals in America. Currently residing here is the surviving Boston Marathon bomber, as is the Oklahoma City bomber, as well as an FBI agent who became a Soviet spy. Basically, these are some of the people most hated by the American government. One former inmate, a Black Power militant called Travis Dusenbury, was locked up here for 10 years. He said, and I quote, "I've been locked up in some isolated rural places, but at least those places I could always see a highway and see the sky. At ADX you can't see nothing, not a highway out of the distance, not the sky. You know the minute that you get there, you won't see any of that, not for years and years. You're just shut off from the world. You feel it, it sinks in, this dread feeling." It seems that in ADX prisoners are locked in cells already in the middle of nowhere and allowed out for just 2 hours a day, only on 5 days a week. Oh, we have a gulag at number 4. We have Penal Colony 56. So Penal Colony 56 is one of the most remote and impenetrable prisons in the world, let alone Russia. Sometimes also known as the Black Eagle Penal Colony, the prison is a maximum security institution specifically for murderers. Penal Colony 56 is home to 260 killers who between them are thought to have extinguished 800 lives. Maybe this prison should exist, but I don't know, these people are pretty terrifying. Do you want them near you? The Gulag is 7 hours from civilization, deep in the middle of a forest. In the winter, temperatures drop to minus 40 degrees Celsius, which to be honest I have experienced in Canada, but I live in a cozy home and have a cozy coat, and there is nothing cozy about this prison. This place is no picnic. Conditions are harsh and inmates are kept inside 23 hours a day, with just 1 hour to walk in a roofless room. Coming into number 3, we have the Nauru Regional Processing Center. According to Amnesty International and the souls who have managed to get free of Nauru, this refugee centre on an Australian-owned island near Papua New Guinea is a prison. Australia has a process for mandatory detention if people living there don't have visas. If you're found without a valid visa in Australia, there is quite a strong chance that you could be exiled to Nauru and live amid squalid conditions, and you won't be allowed to leave. This is also the place that asylum seekers are sent, some of which are genuine refugees who have escaped war, only to find themselves in a far-flung detention centre. The island is in a very remote part of the Pacific Ocean, and those stuck in the centre have no choice but to await their fate. According to a news article on the Al Jazeera website, the residents are stuck with insufficient shelter, little food and safe water, and also some of the detainees have said that they've suffered sexual abuse in the centre. Alright, next up we have what is often referred to as the Alcatraz of Russia. We have the Patak Island Prison at number 2. Patak Island Prison is in the middle of a lake in a far-flung part of Russia. This Russian gulag is home to some of Russia's scariest and most notorious killers, not just murderers but cannibals and pedophiles too. The regime in this prison is so tough and the conditions are so bleak that the inmates are known to completely break down. The only way in or out of this prison is by boat or on foot over 2 very shaky wooden bridges. It's kind of medieval. Oh, and the whole lake is surrounded by a watchtower, so if you managed to get out you would be drowned or shot. Security is so tight that nobody in living memory has ever escaped. This is what the prison psychologist had to say. The place destroys people. The first 9 months or so they spend adapting. After 3 or 4 years, their personalities begin to deteriorate. Finally, coming into number 1, we have one of the most hopeless and isolated places in the entire world. We have Camp 22. Camp 22 in North Korea is probably as close to hell on earth as it gets. North Korea is already a hermit nation, but Camp 22 is a new kind of remote. It is in a region called Hyeorong in the far north of Korea near China. This maximum security prison is actually very much a concentration camp and completely isolated from the rest of the world. 3 lucky souls have managed to escape, but how far they got, we just don't know. From what we do know of Camp 22, it contains prisoners of war. Rumour has it that inmates are deprived of food and forced to eat frogs or rats to survive. In the daytime, prisoners have to perform hard labour. Prisoners are only ever allowed 1 set of clothes, which they will live in and die in, by which time they're reduced to nothing more than rags. Guards patrol with rifles and dogs, and there is also a high 3,300 volt electric fence keeping people on the inside. North Korea has denied its existence, but we know from aerial views that it's still there.
Number 10 spot, we of course have Alcatraz. Alcatraz is one of the world's most known prisons. It's a prison located off the coast of San Francisco, and when it was active, it was a federal prison. It became known as one of the hardest prisons in the United States, where only the worst prisoners were kept. Apparently, it was known for its poor living conditions, along with starvation and horrible, torturous punishments. There were many killings, suicides, and so much violence that it's not a surprise that people believe it to be haunted. Specifically in a section of the prison called D Block, where a prisoner was complaining of an evil spirit in his cell, and the guards found him dead in the next morning. There are many ghost stories, even one where people have claimed to have seen Al Capone in the shower, hopefully naked.
Not because I'm a creep, but because the thought of a naked ghost in the shower is just funny to me. In our number 9 spot, we have the Kingston Penitentiary. In Kingston, Ontario, Canada, there is a former maximum security prison called the Kingston Penitentiary. I actually visited this prison when I was a kid and I remember being terrified. It was so spooky from the outside. Anyway, Kingston Pen has a ton of stories told by people that have formerly worked there and people that have visited the prison. Stories such as feeling cold in strange places to experiencing gut feelings to leave where you are right now. There are stories and sightings of a ghost of an old staff member by the name of William Wentworth, who goes up and down the halls and locks the cell doors. He was killed by what is assumed to be a prisoner, however, his killer was never actually caught. He'll probably haunt the place until his killer is caught, because that's some major unfinished business. In our number 8 spot, we have the Maxwell Street Police Station. Known for being one of the most violent and brutal police stations, it is located in a neighborhood called Bloody Maxwell in Chicago. So if that doesn't say it all, then I don't know what to tell you. The city apparently was flooded with mobsters and the police station was filled with corruption. The dungeon in the basement is where the paranormal rumors come from. It was known as a place for torture and most criminals would never leave the station after going in there. People have reported the rattling of handcuffs on cell bars, as well as screams from past prisoners. It closed in 1997 and, fun fact, the cast of Chicago PD get to hang out with the ghost all the time as it is filmed there. In our number 7 spot, we have the Mansfield, Ohio Reformatory. The Mansfield, Ohio Reformatory was built between 1886 to 1910 and closed in 1990. So many of these prisons closed in 1990, there must have been a huge shift in the prison world in terms of how the prisoners were treated and whatnot at that time. Anyways, this prison is famous for being the inspiration behind the movie Shawshank Redemption, one of my mom's personal favorites, along with Schindler's List. She likes to cry. It is known for being haunted, and so I had to put it on this list. Witnesses have reported paranormal activity in the basement where the solitary confinement cells were. People have reported seeing ghosts, hearing screams and moans from the former prisoners, as well as the haunting of one of the warden's wives who was apparently fatally injured at the prison. In our number 6 spot, we have the Tower of London. Apparently, it is known to be one of the most haunted places in London. It was meant to be a safe place for the royal family at first, then became a dark, horrifying place for prisoners. There are apparently thousands of ghost sightings here, and among them is Thomas A. Becket, who is believed to have caused problems with some of the construction with the tower. But apparently, Queen Anne Boleyn is one of the most spotted ghosts. Many have reported seeing a headless body walking through the tower corridors, which would make sense as the tower is close to the site where she was executed. This is wild. I really want to go there now. I want to see a headless ghost. It would be better if it was nearly headless, like, you know, Harry Potter's nearly headless Nick, but whatever, this will do. In our number 5 spot, we have Old Richmond Jail. Located in Tasmania, Australia, this isn't the most widely known jail, but it is definitely one of the scariest, it seems. This place was built around 1825, and it has a whipping yard, a cookhouse, solitary confinement cells, and basically anything you can imagine a scary prison would have. It has many ghost sightings and is believed to be heavily haunted. From sightings of a lady in a pink dress, to ghost young ones, to feeling cold shivers and hearing strange noises, there have been too many encounters to count. Best to stay away from touring this prison unless you love ghosts, then never mind. Proceed. In our number 4 spot, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. This is a prison that operated as a sort of solitary confinement. It opened in 1829 and was active until 1971. It was meant to psychologically harm the prisoners with the noise being kept to a bare minimum. Many who misbehaved were tortured in various ways, including what was called the mad chair, where inmates were strapped to a chair so tightly that their circulation was cut off. So yeah, it's understandable that it is props haunted. Many have reported hearing crying, screaming, whispers, and even footsteps around the prison. People have also reported seeing dark shadows, and even Al Capone once complained that he was haunted by a ghost named James Clark, who was a victim of the St. Valentine's Massacre. In our number 3 spot, we have the Old Geelong Jail. It could be pronounced Geelong. I don't know. I tried looking it up. I think it's Geelong, we're going with it. Another Australian prison that is said to be pretty fierce. It was built between 1849 to 1864 and was open until 1991. In addition to being a jail, this place was also used by the Australian Army as a post-World War II detention center. It was also an industrial school for girls. So yeah, there is a mixed bag of ghosts at this place. Over 500 plus deaths occurred in this place. People have claimed that particular areas of the jail are haunted by a demon, as well as apparently an old guard haunts this place. In fact, there are reports of sightings in shock blocks, the walkways, the morgue, and even the kitchen, and it seems that perhaps it's more than one demon that haunts this place. Strange smells and violent attacks have been reported, along with screams. Well, thank the Lord this place has closed up shop. I wouldn't wish a ghost haunting on even my worst enemy. In our number 2 spot, we have the San Lucas Prison. This is a prison that is located on the San Lucas Island, which is a Costa Rican island. Many prisoners who were sent there saw the death penalty. The prison is notoriously known for its extremely poor living conditions and torture methods. Apparently, about 60 men would be crammed into a cell at a time. There were cells underground used for solitary confinement, and get this, they were typically flooded with water and sewage. Just disgusting. Yeah, if I was a prisoner that was put in a room with sewage, you best believe I'm coming back to haunt every one of those horrible people that worked there that clearly should have been prisoners themselves. Did I mention the artwork on the walls that was made from human blood? Yeah, forgot that one. It's known to be haunted by a priest and a nurse that worked there, as well as obviously the former inmates. People continue to hear screaming, begging, and crying men till this day. In our number 1 spot, we have the West Virginia State Penitentiary. The prison is so haunted that they even offer ghost tours at this point. Well, might as well capitalize on it. I would. Apparently, they also offer escape room type events, and that sounds horrible to me. First off, it's a real prison, and second, this is a prison that is known for its ghosts. What fun! Let's pretend to be prisoners and escape a real cell and hang out with the ghosts for an hour. Nah thanks, honey. Anyways, this prison is known for having the worst of the worst criminals and many executions. So many of the prisoners were killed by other prisoners, and what is suspected as by some of the guards as well. It is known as one of the most haunted prisons in the United States. Most of the ghost sightings comes from the North Hall, where the most dangerous criminals were kept, where people have reported shadows and footsteps. Apparently also the Hole and the Sugar Shack underground have many reports of people feeling panic when down there, and a paranoid feeling of being watched. I hope that's not where the escape rooms are. In our number 10 spot, we have the Bodmin Jail. The Bodmin Jail is located in Cornwall, England. This jail opened in 1779, and in its most active days, King George III would hold more than 150 150 criminals in there. Quite the overcrowded prison of the time, although people have long held the belief that King George III was mad, so I suppose this decision could be the result of this. Apparently over 100 years, 55 executions took place in Bodmin. A notable execution was a woman named Selina Wadge, whom many have believed that she still haunts the grounds today. Screaming and banging on the walls has been known to be heard at this prison. Now, this prison was closed and abandoned as a prison in 1926, but eventually it was actually turned into a tourist destination, so you can actually visit this prison. But honestly, at your own risk. You may run into the ghost of Selina, and some say she isn't quite as nice as Casper the Friendly Ghost, if you catch my drift. In our number 9 spot, we have the Atlanta Prison Farm. Located in Atlanta, Georgia, this is a prison that was caught on fire in 2009, and the firefighters did not even try to extinguish the flames. Yeah, it definitely wasn't a treasured landmark, that's for sure. The prison is a little different than the others, as it was surrounded by acres of land, and the prisoners would farm their food. This place was known for being overcrowded and having war criminals and people who were either wrongfully imprisoned or imprisoned for minor crimes. After many moons of being shut down and abandoned, eventually this place became a bit of an urban exploration adventure, as people thought it to be haunted, and even ghost hunters would often visit it. But honestly, just looking at the pictures of it, it's just so worn out and it reeks of low vibes that it looks like it would attract ghosts. You are prohibited from visiting this place, so don't even think about it. I am your YouTube mother. Nah, I'm too young. I am your YouTube older sister, and I encourage you to make good choices and not go. Okay? In our number 8 spot, we have the Old Salem Jail. The Old Salem Jail is located, of course, in Salem, Massachusetts. Home of the Hocus Pocus witches, of course. And yes, the town is known for, oh, just a little old thing as, you know, the Salem witch trials. Ever heard of it? Well, if you haven't, Google it. It was quite the historical American event. That town attracts, you know, just the creepiest things. And so it wouldn't be surprising to hear about a jail that was known to be haunted. This jail apparently had stories from it that sounded too gory to be true that people didn't even want to tell them. It closed in 1991, and after being abandoned for a few decades, eventually a hotel brand bought it and turned it into luxury apartment flats. But apparently it doesn't matter how beautiful they make it look, the ghosts from the jail are still around there and people can still hear their cries. One of these days I'm gonna have to visit these prisons in the hopes that I'll be able to hear these supernatural cries. Not that I like people crying, but I want to hear a ghost. You know you want to too. In our number 7 spot, we have the Holmesburg Prison. This prison has to be the worst abandoned prison in the world. I'm serious when I say that the fact that this existed and such inhumane practices were afoot makes me sick to my stomach, to be honest. The prison is located in Pennsylvania, USA, and it was active from 1896 to 1995. The fact that this prison was still open when I was a kid makes me the most uncomfortable. I think our ability to be compassionate has tripled in the last 25 years. Anyways, this is a jail where the prisoners were essentially boiled alive. I'm not joking. The prison was built out of stone and it had large steam radiators, and the wardens would make the temperature go up to 200 degrees, and some of the prisoners would literally die from the heat. To arguably make it worse, the prisoners eventually became testing subjects for biochemical, pharmaceutical, and dermatological weapons. So yeah, it totally makes sense to hear that people believe it to be deeply haunted. I bet. This is one of the darkest prisons by far. In our number 6 spot, we have the Ararat County Jail. In Ararat, Victoria in Australia, there was once a very known jail, the Ararat County Jail, that is now known for its shrieking cries, specifically from an area of the jail called the J Ward. The jail opened in 1861 and was originally intended as a Goldfields prison, but in the 1880s it was turned into a maximum security psychiatric facility for the criminally insane. Not only do people say they still hear the shrieking cries believed to be from the prisoners, but also moans and rapid footsteps are often heard. Apparently when they are heard, it's hard to know that they aren't real, as the footsteps sound so real and human-like. Ooh. In our number 5 spot, we have the Wyoming Territorial Prison. This prison was built in 1872 and was made to confine the growing number of criminals in the area. But not all went exactly according to plan. People kept escaping. This is wild to me. I didn't realize that any prison had a genuine problem with this. I thought when people escaped it was like a one-off thing. Anyways, yep, people would escape, and they had a bit of an overcrowding issue as well. A famous name from the prison though is a man named Julius Greenwald, who was sentenced for taking the life of his wife. He apparently had a quote-unquote expert hand when it came to rolling cigars, and boy would he smoke a lot of them. Apparently Julius's cigar scent can still be smelt at the prison in the place where he died in 1901. Passing away in 1901 from heart failure, Julius's ghost still lingers about in the place he died. It is said that you can also smell the cigar scent in the corridors leading to where he died. Interesting. Well, smoke and cigar/cigarette scents do tend to linger, so it makes sense. In our number 4 spot, we have the Carabanchel Prison. The Carabanchel Prison, located in Madrid, Spain, was originally constructed by political prisoners after the Spanish Civil War between 1940 to 1944. It was known as one of the biggest prisons in Europe until it was closed down in 1998. The prisoners were made to do slave labor when it was active, and after it was closed, it became known as an abandoned haunted building. In 2008, the Spanish government decided that it needed to be destroyed because no one should go onto the grounds. Probs because it was that haunted, but most likely because it was just a sad part of their history that they want to forget. Apparently a hospital and apartments are now in the area, and it hasn't been confirmed if people ever feel any paranormal activity, but we're gonna say probably. In our number 3 spot, we have the William Porter Reformatory. The William Porter Reformatory is located in Tokaji, South Africa. This is a bit of a disturbing prison because it was not exactly for adults. Most of the prisoners were actually quite young, which honestly makes me ill to think about. They were kept in isolation cells, and for what purpose? Oh, just a racially driven one. To further the separation between the black and white working class community, and to teach the prisoners to not interact and to socially know their place. Thankfully, this horrific place was closed down in 1910, but of course the energy and sadness must still surround the building. Seeing the pictures of this place honestly breaks my heart and makes me the most sad. In our number 2 spot, we have the Old Charleston Jail. The Old Charleston Jail is a jail that was built in 1802 in South Carolina, USA. This is an abandoned place that you may actually want to visit if you're someone who's very into supernatural phenomena, as this is a place that is known for its ghostly encounters. Ooh, yeah, I want to go. This jail was actually home to a very notable prisoner, Lavinia Fisher. Lavinia and her husband, John Fisher, were owners of a Charleston inn called the 6 Mile Wayfarer House, and they were sent to prison as apparently they were luring businessmen into their inn and then killing them and stealing their belongings. They say that her ghost is haunting this jail, and reports of many supernatural noises, smells, and sightings have occurred there. So maybe you don't want to visit this place. Something about this woman's story makes me think she's the type of ghost to want to possess you. But I have a very active imagination, so who knows. If I ever visit, I'ma go straight to a priest and get an exorcism afterwards. That's what I would do. And finally, in our number 1 spot, we have the Moundsville, West Virginia Penitentiary. Yes, of course, I have to have this one on the list. This place is one of the most known prisons of all time. The West Virginia Penitentiary is located, of course, in the state of Virginia, USA, and it is most known for its brutal punishments. It was active from 1876 to 1995, and during that time the prisoners experienced beatings so bad that some passed away from them. They also experienced electrocution, and yes, they also practiced hanging the prisoners for a very long time as well. The prison was also known for having many escapees and causing riots. The violence and the inhumane practices were inevitably what led to it being shut down. Many people believe the prison to be extremely haunted, so it is not advised to go and visit if you are fearful of seeing a ghost. I'm Melissa Melotti, your host. Follow me on Insta or YouTube at Melissa Melotti, and I hope that you have A good day, sir.